So, yeah. So, hey, everyone, this is the GitOps Working Group Principles Committee, May 5th, 2021. We're just starting to record, even though we had just begun the conversation. So about last week in the agenda for this week. Moshe?
Yeah, so I was saying that last week we kind of left off as there's a little consensus on, and in fact, active disagreement that governance by Git should be a principle, and perhaps it should be rather a best practice rather than a principle. And I don't disagree with that. So I definitely think it's best practice. Yeah, or maybe it's a should principle, not a must principle. I don't know if we want to distinguish the principles that way. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, great. Yeah, so let's hop right into it then. And just add agenda, please add agenda items to the bottom. If someone does have to leave early, just, at least for my part, feel free to interrupt me and just let me know. And I'll just sort of like put whatever I'm saying on pause, and we can prioritize something else to match someone's schedule.
Has the HackMD, did that go away?
It has not gone away.
It has not. Okay, well I can't.
It is there, and here's the update. This poll, I'll post.
Oh, I found it.
Okay, cool. I'll post in the message. Oh, I actually should link that HackMD in the message and link to the other. Oh, sorry, folks, and link to the other. Let me just update this description real quick to link to the other PR, which has the HackMD information in it, but I'll just put it in this too real fast. You mind just looking through this PR real quick? I just pushed, well, actually, this is probably worth saying. I just pushed these changes, and I'll update that one item, that one. Edits from the Principles Committee weekly syncs will be added as a commit on top of these existing commits, let's say were. Okay. All right, let me just update that. Yeah, so refresh your screens if you want, and oops. Yeah, refresh your screens now if you would like, and you can see the status in the steps. It's exactly what we talked about, but again, it's a pull request. So if I misunderstood something or whatever, you know, there's still a chance to change that. But I think this is what we talked about. For the sake of folks listening to the video, I don't know if I want to read this entire thing, but maybe I'll just do like a quick summary. Is that this pull request linked in the open-GitOps/documents repo is an action item from last week. It's in the meeting notes, and I just kind of copied in what we said that we needed in the action item, and then I listed some steps. And the main ones are I just added an initial empty commit. I realize with Git rebase root, you don't really necessarily need that, but for various workflows like Git flow, it's convenient. So it's just I don't want to get into a Vim versus Emacs war on initial empty commit. I just made one. If somebody really objects, let me know. I think most people don't care. And then I replayed the commits from the PR that's in the GitOps Working Group repo right now from that PR branch on top of that empty commit. And then I just made one more commit with the results from the HackMD doc minus the notes that we said were not intended for it. And I haven't made any additional changes since then. I could recommend some, or we can work on that during the session if we get to it. But that's where we are. Yeah, I have a list of co-authors. I don't have everyone's, I have some people's emails, but I don't know if that's your Git email and if you want that to be public. So I didn't want to, you know, ruin anyone's privacy by posting those. So I figure, we'll just ask the list, I guess, and ask on Slack if people will, give their Git emails. I can also just do a little sleuthing and just look at each person's, or maybe we can divvy it up a little bit. Maybe we can each sort of track this down and grab some, just go to each person's GitHub repo and see if they have, public commits with a sign off. Not every project requires sign off. That's my suggestion. Anyway, I pushed the commit with this kind of provisional list where it just says email in brackets. That, ultimately developer certificate of origin requires an email. So, we can ask each person if they want an anonymous GitHub email, they can give us that. How does that sound?
Sounds fair.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, thumbs up.
Okay, cool. Okay, I'm sorry, I went over 2 minutes, but I didn't know how else to summarize it more quickly than that. That's the status. And I do have a question, but I can save my question about this PR until after folks want to have your turn to say something. I don't want to have to keep rolling.
I think maybe we should get back to the fifth principle. I don't know if everyone has read it or have managed to get an opinion about it.
Where is that? Like I went through discussions and the hack MD, but I.
One sec.
I can link it to. I have it here.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the one there.
So I'm going to raise my hand real quick, and since no one else has.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to note that I believe Moshe is correct about the summary from the discussion from last week about Principle 5. I don't remember anything else apart from that. There is the idea that this can remain open to be discussed further. For example, there is a possibility that we could add things to best practices, and then, or to the notes section or best practices or whatever, and then through discussion gain consensus that one of those best practices should in fact be a distinct principle. But that has not been the consensus so far. And I think we should do this. I added I guess Moshe, my question would be, would you like to change the note that I made so far? Because I just tried to summarize at the end of last week's discussion, but I don't think I'm really, properly wordsmithing this.
So on the HackMD, are we still using that? We
can, but if we don't want to now, we don't have to. If we've gotten to the point where we can do this in GitHub, that's fine with me too. We moved to HackMD because a few people were complaining that there were too many messages before and it wasn't a good way to collaborate in GitHub. But if we want to do real-time collaboration, we could do HackMD. What do you think?
I'm kind of impartial.
Yeah, I don't have a. Yeah, me too. Why don't I go ahead and open HackMD now, so that. Oops, sorry. Let me lower my hand. Why don't I go ahead and open it just so that we have it, and then we'll see. I don't know if we need to spend this time doing it. It could be that you make a comment and a code suggestion to change the wording on the PR. But if we need to discuss something about it, that's great. Okay, and then I recuse myself. Who's next? Christian?
Yeah, so I spent some time. Well, so I read the conversation that Moshe had posted in the conversation here, and I'm not entirely convinced one way or another. So that's like a long way of me of saying is that I don't know if it should, but I'm not convinced that it shouldn't be either. It is a very good point. I can make an argument to where this is an implementation detail versus, or like a best practice versus an actual principle. If I'm taking a look at the principles, you know, we think about adding like the governance through Git, right? Maybe that should be changed, governance through SCM, right? Do we want to say the only way of doing it is through Git or through SCM? And if we are saying through SCM, are things like, because I know with Flux you can apply manifest via an S3 bucket, right? Is that exclusive of something like people just storing things in S3, which can be versioned, but is there, you know, because the idea of governance through Git is I'm imagining like an SCM workflow, right? Like a series of PRs, a series of you know, code review, a series of you know, blame, right? And when I mean blame, I mean like via the, you know, like Git blame, right? I don't actually mean blame, but you know, are we? I guess what is you know, the principle of number 5? What do we want to convey at that point? So I'm not entirely convinced one way or another if we need it or not, or if we can just incorporate some of those things in the principles. So anyways, that's my question, and I yield.
Cool. Jesse?
I agree with Christian. So first, I apologize. I didn't know we were calling this 5th principle. I did read this discussion. I looked at it. I am also not convinced that it needs to be there. So I'm inclined for it not to be there. I think that typically when we're looking at iterating toward a first take on something, it's better to, really important to call things like this out. It's really important to discuss them. But I think what we should be biasing toward are things that we're convinced of. I do agree with your take, Scott, in your comment where basically we have, you know, 3 previous principles, and then our 4th principle right now says the only way to change a system is through these principles. I sort of feel like that might be a little abstract over time, but I think right now it's a better way to get started than to get more explicit.
Okay, cool. Mosh?
Yeah, so I do agree. I think we should release 0.1 without it, and get something out there. Somebody mentioned the S3 bucket, and I think that's explicitly not GitOps because it's not immutable, and it's not version in the sense that it's a accessible version. So I don't think we need to consider that. Like my real principle here is that you need a gate, like where that gate is and how strict or non-strict that gate is. You need a gate somewhere. You can't just go from your laptop into production with no gate. Like I think that's defeating a lot of the objectives. And perhaps it's an automated gate, and it doesn't have to be, or it can be a pull request with an auto merge on lint or whatever it is. But I think you need a gate, and I do think we should make that explicit, whether it's explicit as a principle or a best practice. Like I think I'm really impartial to how we define that.
Jesse?
I think that I agree with you, and I do think that it starts leaning toward opinionated guidance of kind of cultural norms almost. I hate to say that DevOps is tech, right? DevOps is our cultural decisions. So I feel like we would all agree and nod violently that you must have a gate, potentially more than one. I continue to be not convinced that we need to include it in a set of foundational principles that such a gate should exist. I was actually making a point to somebody the other day because they were like, you know, I don't even use Git. like it feels exclusionary or whatever. And I was like, no, it's not a special club. Git is just an analog for source control. It could be Mercurial, it could be SECS, I don't care. And I made the point that you could have effectively a couple of bash scripts on a VM with Mercurial and some Git hook and some, sorry, Mercurial hooks and implement a GitOps system. And that very well could be point A to point B. I don't know if we want to yet get into the business of saying that a more complex system is necessary in order to qualify for the threshold, because I think we want to be inclusive. Mostly to say more voices in the mix, I think will give us a more diverse system and a more diverse understanding of things. So I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, great. So unless we want to spend more time on this, I think Moshe, you've already recommended, have said that you believe it's a should, not a must. So I think we should, unless someone really disagrees with that, I'd like to stick to that and get on to anything else that's needed for our 0.1.0. Okay, cool. I have a question about this. So there's this PR. Oh, and I'm sorry, I actually meant to delete in this last commit, I meant to delete the other files, the glossary and the rationale file. In any case, if you don't mind checking out this, maybe I'll share my screen and I'll link it too, so that you don't have to just try to read it from my screen. Just for posterity, I'll blow up the, oops, excuse me, blow up the font a little bit. All right, so we're here. In fact, let me just go ahead and open this up. Basically, like, these are the edits minus the notes that we said we didn't want in there. Again, placeholder emails for co-authorship. So this removes a whole lot of things, a whole lot of stuff that I don't know is all controversial. We mainly focused on the principles themselves. And if you look, the principles, the changes that we made were not significant. We did make some changes, but it wasn't devastating changes. This is good. We worked through this stuff. We have a process for moving ahead, and we have a process for making sure that all opinions are legitimate opinions, or at least those that don't break the code of conduct are there, and there's a forum for it, and it can be public. What we didn't bring in and what we didn't really get into yet was other pieces of this. For example, what we might want. It's been discussed like over a month ago, but we didn't really work on it, which was, do we want an introduction beyond the initial summary? Do we want to address the scope? All of these things came from somewhere, by the way. They weren't just like out of Brees in my head. It was from, let me just open this up. The initial charter document, which there's a PR to update the charter now, but it's here. And the charter document, I just wanted to let people know where it's from. The charter document was the initial document that everyone that I'm aware of should have known about this or knew about this when they decided to, either when they were part of bootstrapping this group or joined the group thinking, hey, this is the group for me. And so this has, just want to let you know, it's got goals, non-goals, work products, etc. And I just wanted to note that that's where this is from. So some of the other descriptors, some of the other descriptors in this pull request are from, that were stripped from this pull request were, I would say, points that were brought up earlier that were then fleshed out by Brees and myself. And I think some of it was drawn from Brees's initial presentation on GitOps years ago, but others were added later. So I just wanted to point it to you, and please, if you have thoughts on this, maybe we can discuss which of these things are non-controversial. Okay, I yield. Christian?
Yeah, so I do think I'm more that my comments can be more nitpicky than anything. I do think the information is valuable and useful. I'm more about like the order, right? So I think the principles should come first, first and foremost, right? It should be like at the very top, like these are the principles, and it's kind of like almost like the 10 commandments sort of thing, right? Like this, right? And then we go on to like explain, like then we go into the introduction and into all these other things. So I again, my comments more nitpicky, right? But at the core, I do think all that information is useful. We can argue about what to remove and what to re-add, but my big thing is order, right? Like those principles should be like the first thing that comes up.
Yeah.
So.
Got it. And sorry.
Yeah, sorry, yield. Sorry, I forgot to say I yield my time.
Just to let you know, it's on screen as I'm just opening up what that branch looks like in that file. Zip, Jesse?
Yeah, I once again agree with Christian. I was thinking similarly. I think for a first commit, first instantiation, it makes sense to land the principles first. I like a lot of that narrative that came from other sources and was massaged by Brees and by you. And I wouldn't mind seeing sort of a supporting document in the repo with that narrative. I like the idea of the principles standing on their own. And possibly even without the notes over time. I think the notes play a functional role right now that I think ideally with this committee, we would integrate or move them into narrative. So yeah, I agree, and I like where this is right now. I'm inclined to say we land this, and for posterity's sake, you can use my email.
Okay.
It's the Amazon one. Or Gmail, it doesn't matter. So yeah, I think this is great. And I just wanted to say thanks for taking a run at this, because this was a lot of work to kind of tease it out. And so thank you for doing that. And I yield.
Oh, to me or the whole group? I'll take the thank you for compiling
to you.
it.
I mean, for everybody so far, thanks everybody, but specifically for this, to you.
Thanks, yeah. At least our commits are all there and the history is there, so. Oh wait, sorry, was that all you, were you done, Jesse? Okay. Moshe?
So I actually think we should fold the notes into the principles or remove them. Like as a, so like as a sub-paragraph into the principle, or remove them if they don't really need to be there. And then perhaps also just flesh out the glossary a little bit. So like notes for me are this incomplete state. They like, so for me they shouldn't be front and center.
So my hand's only up to reply. So I that's what I meant to intone. So I agree with you, Moshe. I think the notes are playing a role right now where I think our job is to make them go away. So they either fold into narrative or they fold into the principles. I don't necessarily mind them being there right now as this, we're at a 0 dot posture and sort of working through this, but I'm also not opposed to working that as part of this PR. I guess I'm not necessarily pushed either way, as long as we have the understanding that the notes aren't meant to be permanent. Do we agree on that, or?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, yield.
Unfortunately, I can't raise my hand while in presentation view. I don't know, maybe someone else knows how to do this.
I think you have that on the top. If you take down your view options, you have some items there.
Thought so, yeah. Just apparently not. Oh well. I'll have my virtual hand raised after Christian.
Yeah. So my only comment is, are we talking about removing the notes currently, or are we talking about yeah, so I guess I'm unclear. So I'm a fan of, again, I think I'm agreeing with everyone here, right? Everyone, I think, can agree that we should fold that into into either the principles or, like, the rest of the document. But if it's a working document, I don't see why we shouldn't have it there, unless, like, we could call it like working notes or temporary, or something or other like that. Yeah,
So
maybe like what you're doing there, working notes, or
What do you all think about that?
I think
That's
these
good.
notes could just as easily be folded in. Like for number 3, you take that last bullet that becomes a note, and then and then add the note, the fourth note under the fourth item, and put it in italics or whatever it is, or as a markdown note, and just release that, and maybe potentially wordsmith it a little bit. But like for me, a 0.1 is a release, is still a release. Like it just feels like unfinished work that's being released, and it's not that we're very like, there's not a lot of contention really on these items. I think it's just a matter of wordsmithing. Field.
Okay, so I'm gonna take my virtual hand now. I disagree completely. The last several meetings that we've had, especially the last meeting, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with you in spirit, but I do disagree in this is not what we all agreed to when there were many more people on the call, and we've had several rounds of this. We finally now, I personally would be strongly opposed to opening up, diving back into re-editing the principal sentences in the one paragraph description below each, because we got to that place where we had broad consensus and we are ready to move forward. I wouldn't be opposed to working toward potentially folding those in, but not on today's call and not before we release a v1.0. That's not what we agreed to.
So you could distinguish it as a note, just as a markdown note.
That's true.
And then you just take and then it's less obvious that it's something that's temporary. But my 2 cents. I yield.
Okay, Christian is next. Oops, I think you're muted.
Yeah. And also I forgot to lower my hand. Sorry, I did.
Oh.
From the last time. Sorry.
Oh, okay, got it. Jesse.
Yeah, I'm not inclined to want to fold these in at all. So I think the idea of just folding them in right now is not a great idea for me, specifically because we only have like 5 people. And we've had, I mean, these we got to remember that these are the result of multiple iterations of wordsmithing to get them to where they are. So, but that said, they are valid observations. I mean, I think if they're going to fold in anywhere, they would go into narrative. I think, in my mind's eye, we're going to have a website. We're going to come into this is the GitHub repo. This is the open source version of the principles, the repo version, rather, Markdown. And I think, as Christian had said, we want the principles front and center. There's got to be something around them, right? We have to have some wording. I don't think that we want to move forward with 4 principles, some working draft notes, and a glossary. That's just like, that's not what we're going to do. But
So
I do want to make the observation that it is, 0.0.1, this is very pre-GA. I think it's okay for it to be both incomplete and a draft. I think we just want to land something and then iterate.
so
The thing, no, I just want to say, like, the thing that we want to make sure we're not thrashing on is the content of the principles themselves. That's really important. So I think that a lot of the work that we've done so far has landed us here. Now we can iterate as long as we're not, flip-flopping like the content of the principles.
So from my understanding, when we built consensus around 3, that was with the agreement that there would be a note about the explicit nature of continuous. If we are not adding that explicit nature of continuous into the actual principle, then I don't think we have consensus on 3.
Consensus doesn't mean unanimous, though, right?
Well, it does not, but we did agree that there would be notes. We did not agree that the notes would be folded in stylistically underneath each principle. We did agree that they would be presented with the notes. So
that wasn't my understanding. So my understanding that it would be made very explicit, and a footnote isn't really very explicit.
Well, I don't want to be litigious about this, but I would urge you to go back and watch our conversations, because we've discussed this ad nauseum. And the most important thing that we said is that these should be prominent. I think if we get into the bike shedding now about exactly where they are, that's different than what we left off with. Like, let's look, if you would like, at the
so
this is where we left it. We left notes at the bottom like this and said that they should be clear and presented in context with these. We didn't say they have to be woven inside of them or anything like that. And I don't want to get into some sort of argumentative role. I'm just my impression anyway. And I think I would urge anyone to go back and listen. That is not what we agreed to. And I think that, let's not open up new, we're not passing kind of negotiations back and forth on the table at this point. We're just basically seeing what we need to do in order to get what we agreed to over the finish. It's basically over the finish line. But if there's something that is,
so that really was not my understanding from that last call. From my understanding, that call, there was an agreement to make it explicit, and a footnote is not explicit.
Okay, let me just be clear. Are you saying that you believed that from our agreement from the last meeting, that there was an agreement to stick the notes that are prominently here? I don't know how it can be more.
No. So not to fold the notes, but under principle 3, to make an explicit statement under principle 3 that we don't mean instantaneous.
You agree? Okay, well, I will say my piece and then I will step back. But I think that I don't want to spend our entire meeting right now rewinding our last meeting. But I think, if you would like, I really kind of don't want to do the legwork for this, but I'll go back and snip out the part of our meeting where you explicitly, and besides, we don't actually, it is true that we do not need unanimity, but we did agree as a group, I believe, to have this note that you thought was important inside of, to move it from there, specifically from there, into a note below, into a note. And we did that all together. So I'm going to leave it at that and say that if you would like to talk more about it, that's fine. But I would really like to make sure that we do try to.
So perhaps I'm misremembering. I'll go and review the video.
Yeah.
And perhaps I'm misremembering, but yeah. So I'll go and review the video, and we can go and table it for now.
Yeah, I mean, I could always be wrong.
Okay.
So anyway, sorry for that back and forth. I don't want it to be too heated. I just want to be really clear in what I believe I'm trying to do as moderating. But if I'm wrong about something, I will acknowledge my incorrectness. Thank you. Okay, Jesse.
Yeah, I'd like to propose that we sort of accept this structure. I do like working notes, but I think notes are fine. You know, I think, as I said before, I feel like we're just sort of maybe repeating now. I like how this is set up now. As long as the team is sort of okay with this being iterative and this being a first pass that's going to evolve, I think the targeted persistence really needs to be in the principles themselves. And I think we've already covered that. Like, as you said, we've already gone through that. The notes that are there are important to note. I think that they should probably fold into narrative. I think a lot of the diffs that are being removed here, we could go back and do some mining and pull that out and create an overview doc or supporting narrative or something like that could go alongside it.
So again, this is where. So if we're taking these notes and moving them to a narrative, then this explicit declaration of what we mean by continuous gets lost.
I'm okay with that. So I'm just going to go on the record and say 3 different meetings I've said that. You and I might disagree on that, but I think the team has to come to a consensus around whether or not it's important.
But there was consensus that we would make that explicit delineation. So that of what we
in the
mean by
notes.
continuous.
Yeah,
but if we're not
in the notes, right?
In the notes.
I do agree that we did agree to make that explicit in the
notes
specifically.
Okay, but then if we are talking now about removing the notes and folding those away into something else, then we can't do that without moving this back into the principle as an explanation.
As far as I can tell, we're not talking about doing that now. We're talking about that might be a later stage. As soon as we got this done, as soon as we start iterate on what we have right now, we will try to do that. And that's when we start talking about if the distinguishment between continuous and instantaneously needs to be in the principle or not, or whatever it needs to be. We all agreed that the principle as they stand are fine for 0.1, the 0.1 release.
Yeah, agreed.
Let's see, Christian has his hand raised.
Yeah, so just kind of echoing, I was going to do emoji ops, but just kind of echoing kind of what Jesse was saying is that I think we're working towards an MVP for now, not a GA release, which then I now then kind of almost changed my opinion about the notes. I think we should just keep it as it was before we started tampering with it, because that was the one we came to consensus with, and we should just release that, and then we can then go back and then iterate on it and keep the discussion going. So I think now we're just unless I'm wrong, we're talking about, is this, we're looking for looks good to me, right? Sort of slash looks good to me, right? I think right now, I think that's what we're looking for. And I think, I think what we had, when we first started this call, I think we should just go with that and then iterate on that.
I'm happy with that, provided there's a clear understanding that note doesn't get moved out of the principles. Like, once we release it, you cannot remove it
forever.
Okay. So
no, this is important, because I'm going to say right now that I mean, this is a committee meeting. I think it's worth saying that I don't think we can make that commitment.
Well, so generally you don't go back on principles. Like, the principle should hold fast and true forever.
Which is why that's not in the principle.
Yeah, which is why the principles are short and concise, and these are what we agreed are at least the basics of the principles, and they can grow, but they won't change from this, which is why we don't want to add things into it that we don't agree on, which is why it's in the notes.
Yeah, but that's not what we agreed upon. So we agreed upon,
it
and
is.
But it is.
it isn't. It isn't.
Okay, I'm
we
gonna call a point of order here and pretend this is a formal committee. I think Scott is trying to do this hand raising thing, which was a little awkward for
Sure.
me, but I'm trying to comply with it too. So I think we should return to it if that's okay with everybody. And Scott has his hand raised.
Yeah. Thanks, Jesse. Yes, I agree. Hand raising is a little annoying, especially if you have only 5 people. But it is true that there were 3 times where we, in this same meeting, where we talked over one another. So maybe it's good. I'm not going to personally believe that I'm 100% correct about everything and get into a yes it is, no it isn't, yes it is, no it isn't. That's not going to be effective from my point of view. So I think I already made clear what my point of view, but just my fallible human memory ops recollection of our agreement was. Moshe already agreed to review that video to see if maybe, in a, kind of, I don't know, if there's some difference of opinion there about the actual agreements that we made, like in our meeting, and that's great. So I am personally, I feel a little uncomfortable that it seems like there seems to be kind of a ganging up on, but that's not actually, I don't believe that's what's going on. I don't have any kind of alliance with anyone, and certainly not against you, Moshe. I just do not believe in any way that that's that there's anything distinctly incorrect in this pull request about what we agreed on. I literally cut and paste it from our document, and we left it in the document, from my understanding, the way that it was, with the understanding that you would probably want to change the wording. And that is what I asked about. I would like it if you could change the wording, and I would like it if you do review that and come to a different opinion, if you could update us. But I don't, besides that, I'm not sure we can get into anything more than just a yes it is, no it isn't in this conversation. Before I yield, functionally speaking, I just wrote this down. I don't need to be an author on this. I just simply wrote down what I heard you all saying, or what I heard several of you suggesting, is that we change the notes to working notes if that is valuable. That doesn't mean that it has to be that way. We could give our different opinions, but someone said that, I wrote it down. If we don't have consensus on it, I can remove it. I added a note saying these working notes are intended to be temporary and eventually fold into either the principles or a separate best practices document. If we don't have consensus on that, I can also remove it. Everything else is from what we had consensus on. My only other question was, are there other things that were removed here that we didn't even get to from the initial commit, that in this last commit got removed, that we want to keep in the version 0.1.0. I'm not feeling very confident about that given the progress of this meeting, but I was just asking, and that's it. The only other thing I wanted to be clear on is, I think I'm almost at 2 minutes here, is that, and then it's Moshe next, and then Jesse, is that I forgot in my last commit to delete these 2 files because they were not part of, they were not part of our files, the glossary and the rationale. Right now we have an extract from the glossary at the bottom of the principles. My question was, should we just leave it at that as 0.1.0 and then revisit the older commits to see what we want to pull into? And I'll just make the commit to remove glossary and rationale. Those are my questions. You might not choose to answer them, but that's what I'm wondering, and I yield. Sorry, Moshe.
So in terms of the wording that you put up for, like, by continuous, we mean the industry standard continuous and not instantaneous. I'm happy with it. I think that's good. But you said it yourself, there was an agreement that we would make it explicit. That is the consensus decision that we have, is that we will make what we mean by continuous explicit. And if we are now opening the opportunity to remove that explicitness, then we have lost consensus and we've gone back on what we said. Whether that's included in a note or whether it's included under the principle, but as long as we understand that that explicit nature of continuous doesn't get removed from that document, I'm happy with it. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Scott.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself to be kind. Thank you, Moshe. Jesse?
Yeah, so I just want to return to a statement I made maybe like a few minutes back to just say, I think it's a Christian's take too. It's just LGTM. I don't necessarily think we even need to change the note section. Like I think Christian said that as well. It can just stay. And I want to sort of, I'm not sure if in the video the chat shows up. I don't remember because I watched it on my phone. So
Just point of order, it
yeah,
does.
It does.
It is saved inside of the Git repo and it's linked from the meetings document.
Okay, good. So people will see this conversation, as I think I just will
Yes.
call out that yes, if we think of this like software versioning, right? We don't, we don't want to break interfaces, but we might. It's pre-GA. We're not at a major release yet. Though ideally we don't thrash, right? So I think if we just keep that in mind, I think everybody sort of nods to that. So yeah, I'm very comfortable just moving forward with this right now. I definitely want to get a lot of that context and that longer form narrative into the repo. So that's something I don't want to lose sight of, because I think a lot of good stuff is in there. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay, thanks, Jesse. I'm next. It's 3:53, so I'll cut. I think maybe we should cut our responses down to a minute now, just to be, if that sounds okay to you all, and then we can go in order if we want to keep going. Just because we only have 7 left, and I'm like almost halfway through my minute. So okay, so when I was asking about the glossary, if we want to, release this initially with the extracted pieces that we discussed and agreed to in the glossary so far. And we can always go back and revisit prior to this commit that removes a lot of that. And when I say always, I mean we could iteratively do that. Here is my question, and I'm singling you out again, Moshe, not purposefully, but just to understand if this would fit your bill. I'm perfectly happy, by the way, to keep exactly what we said. But would you see this note is actually kind of a glossary item? We're literally saying, yeah.
Yeah. So if we move that under the glossary for continuous, that's fine as well.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Okay.
Yeah, that makes it explicit. This is what we mean by this term.
That makes perfect sense to me. I just wanted to see, we talked about it enough, but the last thing I want to do is go back on what we just said. So if you feel comfortable with that, and just to be crisply clear, it would essentially be this formatted just like this in the glossary. I guess we should put these in alphabetical order or something, I don't know. But anyway, in this glossary section with these several notes, that sounds okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a commit to that. And then in that case, do you want me to, I'll just resolve this conversation because we don't want to add all this extra context about working notes right now, right? We just keep it simple. It says notes, that should be enough. Okay. Okay, let me resolve this. Okay. And then if you're okay with this, we can then resolve this one as well with a note saying this is being moved to the glossary.
Yep.
Okay. Great. Sorry, no one else has their hand. Wow, GitHub's taking a moment here. Okay. No one else has their hand raised right now. Oh. just making sure I understand, Mush, was this note meant to be, was this comment meant to be,
You're not sharing your screen, but
I'm so sorry.
so in my opinion, if we move the by continuously mean to the glossary, then I think that entire principle 3 note can be removed, because those additional, the first two items are already in the principle as any.
Gotcha. I personally don't. Yeah.
But I'm not like, yeah, I'm impartial on that. Like, whether we keep those there or not doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah. Okay, then in that case, does anyone object to the idea of moving all the rest of the notes into a separate best practices document? So I think that's what we had all discussed before, and no one else seemed to object. I just want to know if that would be good for the V1 0.1.0.
I think all the notes are best practices. They might be different, at different contexts and things like that. So I would rather we kept notes as much as possible, but obviously if the two first notes on principle 3 are already mentioned in the principle itself, and the last one is moved to glossary, then we can just remove the entire principle 3 notes by that. So I agree with that.
Okay, so Moshe, I'm going to resolve this conversation then. Oh, never mind. I'm not going to resolve it because you're suggesting that we remove them altogether. Okay, I'll just leave it. Okay, well, if you all would, I know we have 2 minutes left. Let's see, Jesse has his hand raised. Okay,
I just
Jesse
have a
does.
question because I do. I just dropped it now. I wasn't here last meeting. I was very busy at work. I'm sorry. Number 4, I just realized has can be intentionally in it. Did you all work through that and wordsmith it to be that way intentionally, or can that be is? Because it doesn't match the voice of the other ones, and I think it throws doubt in there, but I don't want to reopen this can of worms. So, and I'll yield my time back just so you can answer. Like, I'm fine either way. I just want to make sure it wasn't like that we slipped somewhere.
That's interesting. That did not.
Right?
It is
there, but
interesting in
it
terms of
can
just
be.
stylistic
Okay.
ways.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have noticed that, as in Norwegian that makes sense as a wording. So it means that you always will have to, even though it says can, not could. Or
yeah, this is a little more. It's a little more optional in English.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, because in German is the same. I guess the Germanic language. It's the same thing. Like it means is, but yeah, no.
The only way you can do
it means
means
optional.
that's the only way you can do it.
Yes, exactly.
Not optionally. So by having it say can be intentionally operated on means that this is the only way if we do it.
Yeah. So if we're writing this in English, then that the only way
does that lose its meaning entirely?
It's loose in English. So in English, it's like you're saying definitely maybe almost, right? Like it's right.
If that's the case, then we could just change that to could, I guess. The only mechanism through which a system could be intentionally operated
is.
I think it
so
would
can
be
should be changed to is. Yeah,
it would be. It can be to is the suggestion, and if we should defer it to another meeting, I'm fine with that. And if it becomes its own mini, PR, I'm fine with that too.
Yeah,
I just wanted to call it out and just make sure it wasn't like a typo mismatch thing. That's all.
Yeah, what I was going to ask Jesse is, would you mind noting that in the PR? Because there's one, I actually thought about it, but then just kind of dismissed it for the moment because it seems to be less of a universal law than just saying, hey, listen, if you're doing GitOps, you got to use these principles, right? I mean, it's pretty much almost like a almost like a colloquialism. But I would, but I don't have a strong opinion. I mean, about how it should be. So, I mean, I do, but not the exact wording, as long as the meaning is there that we all agree to. So
I think everyone agreed to principle 4 as a very intentional statement on how you do this. So if wording is fixed to mean that more specifically, that this is the only way it can be, or well, there you go. If the wording is changed to something that actually is specifically, this is the only way to do this, then I think everyone agrees with that.
Yeah, and I would encourage everyone to read them 1 through 4 as progressive, as we said before, since they are numbered, and that the very first one says a system managed by GitOps must blah blah blah, and every single one of those, I believe, implies that same beginning. So as long as we make sure that that all matches up with the others, we're probably good. But yeah, if you don't mind, Jesse, making a note, then we can just do it asynchronously at that point. Okay, cool.
Jay Butler has commented.
And then I know we're at 4:02. So I think I just want to recap the plan is that I'm going to, I'm going to amend that commit and remove the old glossary and remove the old rationale. Not that we don't want to revisit that or have them in there, but that we have not reached consensus on that yet. And the nice thing about the version control is we can look back at that content and those past commits before this last commit that brings in everything from these sync sessions. And then we can then piece by piece decide what we want to add back in, what kind of context and in what documents. I'm just recapping what I think I heard. Does that sound like what everyone feels? Or does anyone have an objection to, or did anyone see that differently? Okay, great. You all are amazing. I love you guys. Or you people, you know.
So are you. Are you.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to when we can all meet in person.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm already drinking beer, so I'll catch up.
Enjoy.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Well, so we're 4 minutes over, but it seemed like that was worth it because now we can get the pre-release out. I'll address the comments before we merge it. I'll look for a thumbs up. Okay. I just want you to know that we don't have there's still some bootstrapping to do in this GitHub org. The maintainers still have to be brought over from the GitOps working group and so on. There's a few other things. So the workflow might look a little weird, but we'll make sure that it's done properly and it still matches the governance for the GitOps working group.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
There's everyone. Bye.
Oh, see you all tomorrow for the meeting if you can make it, the monthly meeting.